Hi there, I'm William Spurlock, and this is my APES review video over ecosystem diversity, natural ecosystem change, and loss of biodiversity. The first thing we're going to go over is biodiversity. Biodiversity is the different types of organisms in a habitat or ecosystem. This is basically kind of like people. We're all different and in different places, but in some places we're all together and we're still different. This is kind of like biodiversity because in forests you have different organisms, and those different organisms all live together, and they all live together and in this one ecosystem or habitat. For example, in the forest you have all these different animals and all these different plant species. You don't go into a forest and see a full forest of one species or one plant. It's multiple together, and that's what biodiversity is. It's just different types of organisms, plants and animals in one habitat and or ecosystem. What we're going to cover next is evolution, a process in which organisms slowly adapt to their environment through genetic traits that diversify them from previous generations. This is like when animals get better at, say, hunting, or get better skills for that. It comes as a genetic mutation at first, and then that improves and goes on throughout generations. As an example I have here is the giraffe. The giraffe didn't fully have a long neck at first. It got it as a genetic mutation, and then throughout generations it stuck because it helped them better, and they continued to have long necks, and they still do today. And there's many different examples about how this helps, because there's birds with average sized beaks who needed to crack open seeds, and they got one of them got a genetic mutation that gave them a smaller beak. They'll be able to do that, and it just continued throughout generations. And so that's evolution. Next up is natural selection. This sort of goes with evolution, kind of, I think. Evolution is just like getting the trait and having it stick. Natural selection is the thing that selects that, sort of. It's a process in which organisms are better adapted to their environment with more favorable traits to survive better. So just like I said before, there's birds adapt with their beaks changing sometimes, and that helps with natural selection. This a small population of birds would have a beak that would help them with their hunting, and it would help them survive better, and not the other ones. So things like this could be possibly an animal's fur color changing, like a fox and the Arctic fox. When an Arctic fox got better to its environment by a genetic mutation that made its fur white, and it survived better, which made it be able to reproduce, and then that's now the norm for it, and it now survives better. Next up is ecosystem services. These are the benefits that the earth provides to humans to support them. This is things like clean air that we breathe, or water that we can drink, things like that the earth provides and that we don't have to pay for, but you could still place a value on it. There's many of these besides water and air, obviously, but those are just the ones that come to my mind for right now. Next subject we're getting into is natural ecosystem change. The first thing we're going to cover in this is climate shifts. Climate shifts are an abrupt alteration of the Earth's surface that lasts long term. This can be things like climate change, or mountains forming. It, oh, so with climate change, there's there's gases and many things that have went up to the atmosphere and made that hotter, and it's changing a lot of things, and this is going to be long term. And things like mountains forming is also long term, because you can't it's not going to just be there and then be gone. It's going to stay there for a long time. So it's things like that happen to the earth, and that's going to stay there a long time. As you see, I have a chart down here that shows how the temperature has gone up through a lot of previous years, through a long time, and it's going to probably stay like that. I don't know. I can't predict the future, but this is having a long-term effect on the earth. Next up is species movement. This is when species move location, either because once they want to leave their habitat or they're being forced to leave their habitat. Some examples of them being forced to leave their habitat is, say, like there's a forest and then these people come in and cut down all the trees. Well, organisms in there that relied on the trees can no longer rely on them anymore because they're not there. So they are being forced to move to another place, and they had to find a new home. On the other hand, species that want to leave, like birds, fly to the south for winter because that's where it's warmer. And if they're here in Ohio, it's really cold during the winter. And I don't think they want to be through that. And that's why they fly to the south, because they want to leave. And it affects them because they don't want to be cold. Next up is ecological succession, the process in which a species structure and ecosystem change during the decades due to different things. This is also long term, where if like a volcano erupts, it will the lava will burn the ground, and that will leave stone there. And as you see in the diagram here, it takes a long time for that place, that stone, to become like a grassland, or to become like the way it was. And that's what ecological succession is, how the ground transfers from being at a state with no grass or no plants to being at a state of that. The final and third topic is loss of biodiversity. The first thing we're going to talk about in this is habitat loss. This is sort of like species movement, but this is the other hand of it that I was talking about. Habitat loss, or also known as habitat destruction, is when a natural habitat is no longer able to support the species living there. Like I said before, say there's forests and people come in and cut all the trees down, then that species can no longer live there because it can't maintain itself there. So it has to move because of that. But we're not talking about the moving part. We're talking about them losing their habitat here. This habitat now cannot handle those animals. And so it's just going to be left there as it is after it's done being chopped down, or whatever happens to it. Next one is overuse of land. This is when a land or section of land is degraded due to things like agriculture use, water, and weather, etc. So in the picture down here, we have a bunch of land being used for agriculture, the growing of plants and farming and things. And these farmers are using all that land just for that, which means that land, that animals cannot live in that land. So, and they're using it, and it's getting degraded because of that. Next one is pollution, a substance that is introduced to the environment that is classified as harmful or poisonous due to its effects. Right here, I have a picture of a factory which has steam going up into the air, which is causing air pollution, and it has some harmful effects. There has been reports of like fires doing the same thing where it gets into the air, and some even huge fires can get into the air, and people in the surrounding areas cannot be outside because if they breathe it in, it will affect them. It'll affect their health in some way or form. So it's not just air pollution. There's many types of pollution. There's even noise pollution, and this affects someone, or it can affect someone or plant species or animal species that in a harmful way. And it happens a lot. It happens a lot. When you look up examples, there's a lot. There's cars driving. If you're on a bus, it still puts out pollutants. And if you're in a car, it still puts out pollutants. And same thing for factories. And some factories even throw away their stuff in the water sometimes, and that causes water pollution. There's just many types that are harmful for us and possibly some other species or organisms. Next up is introduced species. These are non-native species that are introduced to an area or an environment. So many of these are if, say, there is something that's going on and these people want to get rid of it. Like we watched a movie earlier this year where there was something that was affecting these crops, and so they introduced a species that try to get rid of it, and that species end up growing on its own or whatever. But these are species that are introduced to an environment for a specific reason by people, not brought there accidentally, or they could be brought there, but most of the time people either just bring them there or they are brought there accidentally. And now they're in this environment and they adapt to it, and the environment has adapted to it, and it's crazy sometimes. Next up is endangered and extinct species. Endangered species are the species that are low population level and at serious risk of extinction. Extinct species are species that have a low population and have gotten so low that there are no more species, that there are no more left of that species on Earth. On Earth. There's many examples of this. There's many species that are endangered, and there's many different reasons why they are endangered. I have a black-footed ferret on here because I did a project on it, and they were endangered because the prairie dog population went down, and that meant that they couldn't eat prairie dogs anymore, and that means that they starved and their population went down. And now they're an endangered species, but they're slowly sprouting back up. They're slowly getting more of them, and they might be able to introduce them back into the wild sometime in the future. Extinct species are like that, but the population level got so low and it couldn't be controlled, and that species died, the last of that species died, and it's no longer here. Next up is maintenance through conservation, where endangered species are kept in the environment. This is where endangered species are kept in their environment that they are natural to, or held in captivity. This makes sure that the species can be helped in their natural habitat and they can grow larger and not be in risk of extinction. This is not just in their natural habitat. There's some people who take these endangered species and put them in like a confined place that's not outside or could be outside, and they help that species try to get bigger and bigger and try to bring it back to the level it once was. And people are trying to help them with it. Next up is relevant laws and treaties. There are conservation laws in the United States for the protection of biodiversity. There's a lot of these laws out. Well, I don't know about a lot, but there is laws out there about this. That, like the EPA, they help with it. They make sure that there's even like some there's like there's some states that like ban hunting of this animal that's endangered, and if people hunt that animal, they get fined. And I think that works, but there's also other things. There's other laws and treaties that are for that, and also for other things in the environment. And that's the end of my presentation and my video. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.